To circle back to Randle for a moment, Jimmy, I was thinking about this before, it jogged my mind during our conversation about the Knicks and where they're headed. What's the read on Randle now? Because he is a legitimate star this season. It's a remarkable story how he really transformed himself and really put pedal to metal in camp this year and said, I'm going to come in shape. I'm going to really dedicate myself to Thibodeau and what he wants and just transform myself into what I know I can be. The thing I wonder about is for a while, the perception with Randle was, okay, he's on that 3-year deal, pretty big money, but he'll be flipped at some point because there's going to be a team that needs a Julius Randle, and the Knicks will collect their assets and continue to build. Now, is he a centerpiece? Is he a guy who is heading that lethal team we're talking about in a couple of years? Is he one of the pillars of a team like that? Or is he a guy who's still, with his value as high as it's ever been, a guy who gets flipped for greener pastures? I think it's a real question. It's a tough question to ask.
I think he could be a centerpiece because even if the Knicks go out and get a star, and let's say it's Bradley Beal playing next to Julius Randle, the way Julius Randle plays, he doesn't necessarily need the ball to do a lot of the stuff he does. He's a decent shooter. He's a very good rebounder. He's a good passer, but he doesn't do so in what is necessarily a ball dominant fashion. So I think he could be. I really do believe that. Does he put up the numbers like we've seen this year, just off the charts great? That I don't know. But do I think he could be, kind of a franchise cornerstone here where we're looking at Julius Randle and saying, wow, he's a number 1 or number 2 on a low-end playoff type team? Yeah, I do think so. And maybe I'm overreacting to what we've seen so far this season. I think I'd be justified in doing so. But I really do believe that this is a guy who you can maybe not build your entire franchise around, but he could be one of the centerpieces on a really solid team.
Now, dare I say, Nick, he gets flipped for a Beal or a star of that caliber. It's tough to say right now because he's here to stay for this year. He's been phenomenal, and it's really hit on a personal note for Knicks fans because they haven't seen this caliber of basketball in a while and this level of commitment from their team. I don't know. Could a team come knocking that could really put you over the hump and they ask for Julius Randle and that's part of the package? I could see that, and that might be a decision the Knicks need to make and one of the tough decisions that they need to make to get themselves into that position.
There's an argument to be made that now is the perfect time to move on from Julius Randle and trade him because his value is likely never going to be higher. And it's a career year for a reason, career year in points, rebounds, and assists. And that's the highest value you're ever going to sell. There's something to be said for, buying low and selling high, in this case with Julius Randle. But I'm tending to agree with you guys in saying that I just don't see them moving on from him at this point, just with how well he's played. And it's difficult because you always have to take into consideration where this team is and the way they operate and really the fan base too. I just don't think that you can sell as the Knicks where that's important. If you're pick whatever team you want, the Charlotte Hornets, you can kind of do whatever you want because what's the following down there, for example? But when you are the Knicks and you have struggled for so long to try and be relevant in the NBA, and then, we're on track, we're headed in the right direction, and then, okay, well, our best player, the guy who's our first All-Star in 3 years, we're going to move on from, we're going to trade him for whatever else we think we can get. I just think that's a really difficult sell to your fan base, one. And two, it's not like it's the NFL where you feel like you're going to get equal return. Very rarely when you are trading a star, are you ever winning that deal from the team that's trading the star? And you can argue whether Julius Randle is a star or not. But the point is, what are they getting back for him that is going to make sense? They've got the money to pay him perhaps at a higher rate than they are right now going forward. And I think he's someone who you can help build around, especially, Jimmy, I think it's a great point that he's not a ball-dominant player. So if you go out and you make a move for whomever it is, whether it be in free agency or make a trade for Bradley Beal, for example, he is someone who will coexist with both of those guys really nicely. And I just don't see how you could move on from him. But the sentiment is right. That was always, oh, you're going to flip him because he's not a permanent piece of this team. I think he's played his way into being a permanent part of this team.
And that's a change from what it was a season ago. Randle, the fact we're calling him a good passer is actually phenomenal, considering what we saw a season ago. It seemed he was always getting stuck up in trying to make whatever he was doing happen. And now he's a centerpiece. He's a focal point of the team. Could he be a second piece on a really good Eastern Conference playoff team? I think so. I see him more as the number 2 if the Knicks are going to be really good to whatever that ends up being, and that's fine. But you're right. You probably can't get away with moving him right now. Maybe in a year and a half, we're having a different conversation. But I do think you can view him as a building block, not the building block, but a building block moving forward.
No, you have to get somebody else. You can't just say, all right, we've got Julius Randle, we're all set. I mean, that's evidence right now. I mean, they are having the best season they've had in a long time, but let's not overstate it, where they're, what is it, 6th seed right now? They're not a bona fide contender in the East right now, and Julius Randle is their best player. So there's certainly work to be done. I agree with you guys there. All I'm saying is the stars don't necessarily grow on trees, and with nobody really banging down the door to come to New York right now, and the way that has gone for the Knicks over the last however many off seasons and trying to attract free agents to come to New York, I just don't think it's a smart strategy to say, all right, let's move on from Julius Randle in hopes of getting an improvement right now, because it's not necessarily, and I do try and make this point, it's not about who is going out. It's about who you're bringing in return for Julius Randle. And I just don't think that there's going to be something that's going to help the Knicks right now in return for Julius Randle.
And hey, maybe their first real star since Carmelo Anthony, because they were right on Kristaps. He's likely going to be out of Dallas in pretty soon type fashion. He's not a guy who can stay healthy. He's a ultra talented player who the Knicks were right about. He knocked on their door and said, "Move me," and they moved him. And look, I wouldn't want Porzingis to be the focal point right now, but I'm fine with Randle being one of the focal points. So good conversations the Knicks are having. I think that's what it boils down to, and what Jimmy was harping on before.
And I think one more thing just to mention, look at how the Nets did it across town. Part of how they were able to get Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, the culture they had built in 2018-19, they started winning, they made the playoffs. And granted, I know the Eastern Conference is the Eastern Conference, but if the Knicks can build something similar like that, win, maybe make the playoffs this year, that might help attract some people. And I think the Knicks weren't a destination just because the franchise was such a tire fire really before Tom Thibodeau and Leon Rose got in here. And now you're sitting here looking at it and saying they might have a good culture and they might know where they're going. And if they do, they could probably get a star in free agency possibly at some point down the road. Who that is, who knows? But I think they're doing the right steps as opposed to what they tried in the past, which was tanking and we're going to get Zion. They didn't get Zion. And, oh, well, we're going to clear cap space, get this person. They didn't get that person. So I think they're doing the right things in terms of getting a star, even if it doesn't seem readily apparent right now.